I run into damage on polyethylene pipe a lot of times too. Usually you have a string of polyethylene pipe out before you do a burst, which I'll show you, and it pretty, not frequently, but people try to run over it on occasion just because they're not paying attention. And the sewer pipe that we use is gray in color, so sometimes it'll match up with the road, but especially above ground, really easy, just a simple cut and refuse. So, I mean, really durable material. Matt Werth, I work for IPR, a company that owns PM Construction. PM Construction is the largest piper/slipline contractor in the world. We do, like we said earlier, we do about 1 million linear feet a year of that form of trenchless rehabilitation. And sliplining was kind of the first of the trenchless rehab, and they showed an example of it. And what sliplining essentially is it's pulling a brand new polyethylene pipe of a smaller OD than the original ID of your hose pipe, pulling that pipe in and then grouting your annular space. Before the kind of invention of pipe bursting and hammers and some of the equipment that I'll show you, a lot of sliplining was done, and one of the largest markets where it was done in was Houston, Texas. They were under where I live now, and lived for the past 2 years. They were under a huge consent order by the EPA, and the EPA said, you have to rehabilitate your system and you need to have an answer really quick. So they employed a lot of sliplining 6-inch polyethylene pipe inside of 8-inch clay, a lot of unreinforced concrete lines. Well, that ends up working out really well for us because we sliplined a lot of pipe. Now they need the capacity back, so we're going back and bursting all of that pipe and putting in new polyethylene. So we really appreciate Houston helping us out in that. Bursting, lines that can be rehabilitated using pipe bursting. Water lines, which is really starting to scratch the surface now, being able to use trenchless methods for rehabilitating your water lines. I'm expecting, especially around the south central region of the country, we're going to start seeing a lot more trenchlessly done like that because of the problems we're having. Most common for sliplining and pipe bursting, sewer mains, storm sewers, gas lines. Gas lines is how pipe bursting got here. The process was invented by British Gas, brought over here. We started rehabilitating sanitary sewer lines using it. Lines that can be burst. You have 2 types of hose pipe that can be burst. There are 2 types, period. You have your fracturable and your non-fracturable pipes. Your fracturable pipes, your clays, some of your casts, Orangeburgs, unreinforced concretes. Your non-fracture pipes, your steel, your HDPEs, your ductiles, all those can still be pipe burst, and we'll kind of show you the process. But what's really great about using pipe bursting as a trenchless rehabilitation for any underground pipelines is you can replace your underground pipes with the same size or larger pipelines. It's the only method that you can use that's going to be able to do that on grade. So the biggest issue when it comes to pipe bursting, and like we talked about before, there's a lot of methods that construction methods that you can use polyethylene pipe, but I'd say sliplining and pipe bursting are probably 2 of the most utilized. For pipe bursting, it all depends on the soil conditions, whether you're able to do it. Has anybody ever spec'd, done, seen, heard of pipe bursting in the room? I've got, oh, well, great. Well, this should be really easy. This is going to be pretty basic. We'll go through it really quick, and then I've got a project that we did up in Dallas, and we'll kind of go through some of that. But the real key to bursting is what your soil conditions are, and that's going to depend on what you're able and the capacity you're going to be able to use. So your additional soil conditions are original backfills. They're really expansive soils, really easy to build an annular space into. After that, your expandable clays, your loose cobbles, and right here is when pipe bursting starts to become a little bit more difficult. When you get into your beach and running sands, these are really ideal because when you're going in and you're breaking out that existing hose pipe and expanding those, dispersing those soils, you want those soils to hold place to create a path for your new pipe to go through. And it's really easy to do on these 2. When you start getting down into these 2, you run into pulling that pipe into the ground and losing that annular space that you're creating. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a lot of drag. It's basically putting your pipe into a headlock, and creates a lot of drag on the pipe. And then densely compacted clays and rock. This is one of the almost no-goes, depending on your pipe invert, where that original line's running, what it's running through. Densely compacted clays, more difficult conditions, but can still be done. So the pipe burst method I'm going to go over mostly today is using the pneumatic hammer. The pneumatic system, you've got pneumatic pipe bursting, you've got static pipe bursting. Pneumatic is the majority that's used on a lot of sanitary sewer lines. So what you have is this is your hammer here, okay? And your hammer is run by an air compressor of a variety of sizes, depending on the size of your hammer, okay? And what that hammer essentially is, a silver cylinder like such, that when you turn that air compressor on, a piston pushes forward and strikes the front of that, returns and continues to go forward. What happens is with that friction, when that piston hits the front of that hammer, it vibrates through that expander and creates vibrations that will fracture and break out your existing hose pipe. Okay? Then what we have is your expander. Once that hose pipe is fractured and broken, your expander is then going to disperse those pipe materials in your soil out and create an annular space for your new pipe to come through. Okay? These are 3 of the setups that you can use. This is a front expander setup, probably the most popular used for sanitary sewer lines, where your pipe, where your hammer is inside of your, this is your polyethylene pipe right here. And the hammer is inside of that pipe, brought up through that expander. The expander is bolted onto the pipe, and your winch cable is hooked up to that. What we have here is a rear expander, where your hammer is on the front of that pipe, your expander is on the back, cable hooks up to here. Here you have a rear expander with your piston and your hammer on the front, also employed with a guide head. What a guide head is used for is if you're going to be doing aggressive upsizes. What you have is, you have an 8-inch line that you need to upsize to, let's say, a 16-inch line. You got an 8-inch line, 16-inch line. We need to make sure that you're keeping that grade. And so when you have a guide head and a rear expander setup, it helps you get your tool inside the existing hose pipe and keep everything on grade to be able to pull that through. Here we have a picture. This is what the hammer kind of looks like. Okay?
How successful are you in keeping the grade?
Very successful. Well, it's going to follow the grade of the pipe. It follows that hose pipe with the winch. And what happens is when you've got your hammer, what's really getting it through is the winch cable, and you'll see it. I'll show it here in a minute. Your winch cable, and mostly what you use is a 10-ton winch. It is employed to keep it going and on grade, and that hammer is what strikes and lurches and pulls that forward. So as that winch cable is pulling it through that pipe, it's going to follow your existing grade of your pipe. And we'll get into some of the constructability of that later on, because with trenchless technologies, I don't care if it's, we're also a large CIPP contractor in pipe bursting. If you've got a large sag in your pipe, you're going to have a large sag in your pipe when you're done. It's going to follow that. And anybody who tells you different is going to give you a horrible project, and you're never going to spec it again. And your client's really going to be aggravated. So this is a example of a hammer right here. And this had a front expander on it. So the reason we employ this a lot of times is because it'll allow us to do just one excavation. Okay? Forget that that's there. Let's pretend that this is a front expander with the hammer inside of the pipe. So what we have here is you have an excavation, and the size of this excavation is going to depend on the depth of your sewer line. Because HDPE is an incredibly workable pipe material, it will bend, go down, and get into the existing hose pipe really easily, but you do have to give it a little bit of run to be able to go down and do that. So if you've got an 8-foot depth sanitary sewer line, most of the times you're going to need roughly 15 to 20 foot long launch pit to be able to get that pipe down into your hose pipe. Okay. Then you have your winch cable, or I'm sorry, your winch, 10-ton, 2-ton, 20-ton. There's a variety of different sizes depending on the pipe. Whether you're upsizing, it depends on what kind of force you're going to need. That winch cable is drawn through your existing hose pipe. It's connected to your hammer, which is on in front of your expander there. You turn the air compressor on, runs at about 110 psi. That's going to start that piston, and you'll hear a ting, ting, ting. Everybody ever been out? You've seen it, and people been out to piper sites and actually seen it go? Okay, so you hear the ting, ting. I hear that in my sleep. I'm out on so many piper sites. Ting, ting, ting. And what it is $1, $2, $3, $4. So I really like that sound. But you start to feel the vibrations in your feet, and you hear it in your sleep. So you turn that hammer on, you get it down in your hose pipe, you start that winch really slowly, make sure that we're on grade, and then you let it fly in there, okay? Now, when you have, remember, we're pretending that this is a front expander with, burn out your, it's a front expander with this in here. So you have your one excavation, you're down under your pipe, you finish your burst, okay? On your whatever your other access is, most of the time it's going to be a manhole. It could be another excavation, it doesn't really matter. You just have to have a tiny place for you to get into. you're going to chip out this manhole from the inside a little bit, and you're going to chip out the bottom invert because you have to have room for that expander to go in, okay? So if you have 8-inch pipe, you're usually going to have a 10-inch expander, okay? Now what's great about the front expander with the rear reversible hammer here is you can pull that pipe all the way into your manhole, undo your winch, pull, that hammer is then going to be put into reverse using your air compressor, will go out of the back of that pipe, which is what we saw before. You can get in, cut off the pulling head from your polyethylene, lift it out with an excavator right out of your manhole. Now we've rehabilitated a section of pipe using only one excavation, and then excavations wherever you have service lines. Okay, so let's use an 8-inch depth sanitary sewer line. You have probably around a 15-inch launch pit, and then 4x4 cuts wherever you have service reconnections. So it is it's not a trench-free, it's a trench-less technology.
15-foot launch pit.
15 foot in length.
Right, okay.
15 foot in length, and then whether you're using speed shores or, and so that kind of takes us into the constructability of some of these. So it's like, so Matt, you're always digging a hole in front of your launch pit always has to be in front of your other manhole, right? No. It all depends on the runs, and that's all the workability of this polyethylene. Okay, let's say this manhole, this is a big, busy street right here, okay? And you got a manhole right here, you're 8 foot deep, and you're like, gosh, man, we can't go digging a hole right into the street and shut all that down. It doesn't matter. I can dig the hole on the back of the manhole, slope it down to the top of your invert on what's coming in, break that out, enter right into the manhole, get it on invert, and pull from there. Okay? Now to the second part. Your pipe is going to stay with the existing grade of the hose pipe, okay, to a point. Using polyethylene and pipe bursting, because of the strength of the winch and the hammer, it will straighten out that sag a little bit. So, you know, if you have an existing pipe and you're at about 40% capacity and you and a sag, and you burst that line, you can maybe expect it to get down to maybe 30% and drop it down a little bit because it's going to straighten it out a little bit. But if you got a section of pipe from station 1+25 to station 1+50 that's got a sag that's completely underwater, it's going to be underwater when we're done. But we don't have any set place we can dig that launch pit, that excavation. So if we've got a 300-foot section, station 0+00 to 3+00, and we've got an area at station 1+50 to 1+75 that's completely underwater, and somebody's having problems with their service that comes in right there, then just dig and launch from there. You can dig your excavation, you set your winch up on one end, run that winch cable through, get your polyethylene strung out just right, pull that piece in, pull the second piece in, and join right there. Build it back up with rock. Now you've rehabilitated your sewer line, and you've eliminated a sag. Okay? Now if you have a sag in your line that runs from station 1+25 to 2+25, that is an open cut installation. You can't use pipe bursting, you can't use CIPP, you can't use directional drill. That's just all there is to it. So where I say I think pipe bursting is probably a solution 95% of the time, there's times when it's just not. You know? And if anybody tells you any different or tries to construct it differently, they're not doing you guys a service designing it, and they're not doing the client a service. So it's about being responsible. But anybody who is a pipe burst contractor, you have to dig a launch pit, meaning you have an excavation capability. Just dig up places where you have to dig it up, but it's pretty rare that we see that. Most of the times, you know, like I said, we've got just out of our Houston office, we employ 12 crews that work full time and just doing pipe bursting, and we run across very little problems like that. So upsizing, one of the biggest benefits of using pipe bursting as a rehabilitation method. 0 to 25% is a really common upsize. We do a ton of 6 to 8. Well, 6-inch lines bringing up upsizing to 8-inch pipe. When you get to 25 to 50%, it becomes a little bit more challenging, and above that, 50 to 125% is experimental. All of this can be done. Where it depends is soil conditions, depths, below ground infrastructure, above ground infrastructure. Every project, as you guys know, is a little bit different. But these kind of aggressive upsizes are possible to do, so long as you have a responsible contractor that knows what he's doing and has the appropriate equipment to do such. Pipe depth. One of the things you need to realize when you're pipe bursting is the chance for upheaval. Okay? So the rule of thumb is that for every 1 inch you're upsizing, you need 10 inches of ground cover to keep from upheaving. Because when you pull that pipe in, you're dispersing those soils first up, then slightly out, and then just a little bit down. That's where those soils are going. Okay? So For every 1 inch of upsizing, you need 10 inches of cover. So Matt, I got a project where you're going to be doing 8 to 8 inch. So I guess I don't need any cover, right? Wrong. Because our pulling head on an 8 inch pipe is 10 inches. So I'm upsizing from 8 to 10, 2 inches, I need 20 inches of cover to keep from heaving the ground. So that's just a really easy way to remember that. When you're going to be crossing some kind of utilities, we cross a lot of gas lines, we cross a lot of water lines. If you have a shallow sanitary sewer line, you have to do, just because we're excavating that one place, it doesn't stop us from having to do the same locates that everybody else has to do. And when you're out there planning out your runs, if you see that you've got a 5 foot, 4 foot deep sanitary sewer line, and you see a blue line, main, that's crossing right above it, you need to dig down there and explore and make sure that it's not sitting right on top of that sanitary sewer line. And a lot of times you can dig down to it if you got plenty of cover. If you relieve that ground pressure, that pipe can go through there really easy. We can tick down that air compressor, slow that hammer down a little bit, slide it through that open excavation, and we can start going again. So I mean, that's really the strong point for pipe bursting. It's not just your above ground infrastructure, but your below ground infrastructure and all the utilities.
Question. So is that the space you need to leave? Let's say you go underneath the sanitary line with it for some reason.
Yeah.
If you went under another utility like a sanitary line, you're bursting a water line. Do you have to leave that same amount of distance for the upheave between those two utilities?
Well, you're going to want to go down there and excavate. If you don't have good as-built and you're not sure where it is, you're going to want to excavate down there. Plus, whenever you're crossing, water and sanitary, a lot of times in an open cut installation, one of them wins, and you have to kind of keep away. Where they're doing, a lot of times you'll just encase the entire thing in concrete at those conflicts. But if you're going between the two, you need to get down there and excavate and make sure. Now, if I've got a 10-foot deep sanitary sewer line and I'm crossing and I see a blue water main, I'll probably put it here. I don't know too many water lines that run about 10 feet deep, and not in Texas, and not in the other places we do work. We do a ton in the southeast and northeast, all over the place. So, and we're familiar with a lot of different ground conditions. So, this is kind of a joking sort of deal. Another successful open cut project. One of the reasons that everybody that worked for our company at one point laid water lines, sanitary sewer lines, etc. Then we got into slip lining, and then we got into pipe bursting. And the reason that we employ pipe bursting as a method of rehabilitation is because it's fast, it shows considerable cost savings, and it is green. We kept talking about green initiatives. Okay, well, your pipe materials may be green, but another thing you need to think about is your carbon output. If you don't have excavators moving full time all the time, you're saving that. And the one thing that nobody ever thinks about is stripping the earth of its natural resources. If you do an open cut project, you need to bed that pipe. And whether you're putting 57 stone down or you're dredging sand or sea sand or whatever, your backfill materials, it doesn't come from thin air. I mean, you're either dredging rivers, pulling out of pits, it doesn't matter. A lot of times when you've got an aging infrastructure and you've got a pipeline that's failed, there's no problem underneath. Okay, because the H2S gases, your sanitary sewer lines, if you look at an old sanitary sewer line, you'll notice from that spring line down, it looks pretty good. It's from there up where the gases have eaten it up where you got your real problem. Okay, so that's another way that it's kind of a green technology. I'll blow through this real quick so everybody can get to their break. 42-inch pipers, City of Dallas. Site overview: baseball fields, busy road, lake, creek. I mean, really a mess. Dallas had to set up for an open cut. And then very quickly decided that wasn't going to work out. Technology we employed using TT's Taurus hammer. That's a 24-inch rear expander hammer. One thing you'll notice on this is these are what they call a schnoz or fins or whatever. Everybody's got a name for it. What this is used for is when you have a non-fracture pipe in a pneumatic application, that's going to score and split that pipe. So when your pipe comes through, it's scored. When your expander starts to come through, it'll all split apart and those things will disperse. If you don't cut those non-fracturable pipes, what's going to happen is that pipe is just going to kind of drag along with that expander. And man, you're going to have a void and you're going to have a real problem. And you should know it immediately if you're checking your winch properly and the drag. So 24-inch rear expander. Really unique, we had an 18-inch Goliath a rear hammer on this. The reason being is with a 42-inch HDPE, it's a really heavy pipe, okay? And so you need help getting that pipe into the ground, and just using your winch in the front hammer is not going to be enough to the back 250 to 300 feet. So you've got your front hammer, turn that on, that's beating forward and getting that pipe through. Now you've got your rear hammer turned on, that's assisting it, pulling it through, lurching that forward. Remember we talked about that winch doesn't pull it in, it's that hammer that pulls it in, lurching that forward and helping it kind of wiggle and move into place. And I would have brought a piece of this 42-inch pipe, but I used the carry-on. So that's another picture of the glide hammer, and then a 20-ton winch. I just want to go through some of the pictures. The reason that they went to pipe bursting is so it would be less invasive than digging the whole thing up. This is a forest, a very thick and dense forest. City of Dallas is a fan of trees. A lot of places I work are a fan of trees. Austin, Atlanta, there's, I mean, a ton of places. They really like their trees and they don't want you digging the whole thing up to be able to access. So we were able to pipe burst through here. This is a creek. The amount of erosion control that we would have had to do around here if we were going to open cut all of this would have been substantial. This line is 25 feet deep and it is extremely wet. The amount of well pointing we would have had to do would have been extensive and very, very costly. As you saw before, 3 baseball fields. They told us they were softball fields. They are baseball-sized fields. When I was lining this out and started the quote on this, I was like, okay, softball field, home plate, left field, probably 250 feet, somewhere in there. 350 feet these animals are playing softball on a full-size baseball field. They're brand new. I don't know if anybody's ever done any kind of laying sod like that for professional ball fields and the different layers that you have, your rock, your sand, really expensive to renew. Capacity. CIPP wasn't an option because they had to maintain or upsize the capacity. Large comprehensive bypass. We built a little suspension bridge so that we could dump all the sanitary sewer line into a 60-inch line that ran over by Fair Oaks.
What's that bridge made out of?
It's made out of, I think it was 6x6s and a lot of wire, and our superintendents are good. They are good. I don't walk across it. It was really good. In fact, I did walk across it. Here's your 2 air compressors. And these last couple slides, I just want to show you, I want to show you the flexibility of HDPE, and that's why we're here. If I wanted to, I could get any pipe material I wanted spec'd in a job. Because we're an experienced contractor, we were one of the first ones to start doing pipe bursting here in the United States, and we probably do 2 or 3 times as much as anybody in the country in a calendar year. I can get anything spec that I want. People trust us. We choose and like to use polyethylene because of its versatility. Okay, I've burst pipe with ductile iron, replacing ductile iron with ductile iron. It was one of the most idiotic things I've ever been a part of. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, and it's because somebody went in and sold them a bill of goods that they had. First of all, you don't have a monolithic system. Now we have joints. What is the point of that? You know, when you can put in polyethylene, have a monolithic system that's just as strong, as durable, and works. But I just want everybody to see, 42-inch pipe, 8-inch pipe, I can wrap around your house, fuse it, and leave it there. Okay, 42-inch pipe, really thick wall. It's a lot tougher to move around. But look at this bend radius that you have on this kind of pipe. Okay, and it'll really show here coming up. So this is us. We did have to dig into the infield of one because this was really wet. We were right by this creek and we had to break up the shop. But we dug into the infield and we were able to make that kind of work out. But look at this that we have strung out here. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I took down one 8x8 section of fence instead of having to take that whole fence. That whole fence, this is all concrete. They didn't just concrete the post, they concreted the whole thing.
How big of a pole did you make on this?
We were usually doing about 300-foot poles. Was pretty standard. So
how many days would that take?
This took us to do 2,400 feet. I think it took us, let's say, 5 or 6 weeks. It went pretty quick. And now, granted, we started over in the forest area because this was one of the largest poles that we've ever done, and because you had some wet soil conditions, we did it back there in the wood area as sorts to try out, you know, because really what we had to do is our lubricants. Because you got wet soils like that, just like your beach and running sands, like I talked about before, they can collapse down on you and put a headlock onto your pipe. 8-inch pipe, not as big of a deal. You can kind of work with that. 42-inch pipe, because of the weight and that drag, you need to have some sort of lubricant. We used a very minimal amount of an epoxy lubricant that helped us get a lot of this pipe through. So.
How long a pole do you do on 8-inch to 12-inch?
It depends on your soils. But you know, typical, I know our company typically, we do a lot of 8 to 8, we do a lot of it in easements, we do a lot of it about 8 foot deep. And what we'll usually do is, depending on if you've got your pull runs between manholes are usually 300 feet. And a lot of times we'll try to break those up, and we try to do a lot of 500, 600 foot pulls, pulling through manholes, okay? We'll reconnect the services on the first section, leave the services on the second section open. The rule of thumb is that you have to have the people's services reconnected in a 24-hour period. So we're able to pull through, reconnect these services, the next day reconnect these services, do another pull, reconnect services. So we're kind of doing 3 days worth of work in a two-day period. But it depends on your soils. It really depends on your soils. If you have expansive soils, you can make longer pulls. But traditionally, you're usually doing manhole to manhole, 300 foot. But if you've got 0, 180 manholes, you can pull through those no problem, as long as you break out that manhole, the 0 and 180, you break that out, give room for your expander to come through, because you don't want to damage that manhole. So this is just a pipe entering the hose pipe, front expander. We went through that. Another picture, just showing how that thing can bend around. And then, I mean, look how this is our receiving pit. Now, because you have that rear expander, front hammer, you can't pull that out using a manhole. You certainly can't do it with a 24-inch hammer. So, but look how small that excavation is right there, in between those two ball fields. Saving, I mean, look at all of this. Saving all that. So, really, really neat project. That's all I got. So,
Any quick questions before we take a break?